Hello and welcome to this France 24 Radio France Internationale interview. We're in the presidential palace in Dakar with Laurent Corot of RFI, and our guest today is the president of Senegal, Abdoulaye Wade. Thank you for hosting this interview.
You're most welcome.
You're president, but you're also a candidate for re-election. The election is due to take place. The first round will take place on the 26th of February. There have been rumors regarding your state of health. Do you feel ready? Do you feel fit for a campaign that will be tough?
Well, judge for yourselves. I feel very fit and fully prepared to fight a good campaign.
On the 26th of February, you will have to face opposition from civil society and also from people who have left your majority. Do you think it will be a tougher battle than in 2007, or do you think you will achieve a 56% score?
I'm going into a struggle with almost no opposition.
So you think you will be re-elected in the first round?
Absolutely, without any problem. After all, these people are no match for me.
Another public figure, there are lots of candidates, but there is Youssou N'Dour. What's your reaction to his candidature?
I wish him lots of luck.
So you don't want to talk about it?
No, not at all.
At the end of January, 29 days before the first round, the Constitutional Council will have to validate your candidature, which is causing a lot of controversy here in Senegal. What will you do if the Constitutional Council decides to invalidate your candidature?
Let's talk about this candidature. For the past 2 years, the strategy of the opposition has been to do everything to prevent the President Wade from running. We're in a democratic republic. A citizen has every right to stand, provided the Constitution allows it. But these people know that they're no match for me, and they've done everything to ensure that I don't stand. They've first of all started saying, you're the father figure, and then they put pressure, they've demonstrated. Now, do you think this is democracy? Putting pressure in the street to bring somebody not to stand? And they've burnt down buildings for a whole day. They've burnt houses. They've done lots of damage simply because this is a dynamic strategy. If it doesn't work, they change strategy. At one point, they tried to convince my friends in the West, in the United States, in France, that if I were simply to declare my candidature, that the whole of Senegal would burn. And this is what they wanted to prove, and this is what led them to perpetrate violence. But this didn't work. I've been presented by my party, by the population which is backing me, and they're saying, well, on the day of the election, everything will burn down. Nothing will burn, because we are a structured state with a government. We will take all the required measures to ensure that these ambitious people who refuse to submit to democracy are not able to ravage the country. On the 23rd of June, they've demonstrated, but now I can tell you this is over. They've brought US congressmen, and they've said, well, everything is going to burn down in Senegal, and there'll be a loss of life. So you should advise him not to stand.
I don't repeat my question. If the Constitutional Council invalidates your candidature, what will you do?
Listen, I will comply with the decision of the Constitutional Council. I have decrees. Sometimes these decrees, like any democracy, are overruled by the Constitutional Council, and I accept the ruling. There is no problem. I've done enough for this country, and if I'm to withdraw, I'll stand down in dignity. But the problem is I feel that I still have a job to finish in Senegal, and I think that this is the feeling of most of the population. Now, if some people feel that they can use other channels than democracy to come to power, then that really is deplorable.
Is this something that you fear? A fresh outbreak of violence? We've heard members of the opposition.
No, there will be no escalation. Everybody says that that's going to happen, but
People talk about militias, thugs taking control of the streets. For democracy, isn't it something negative?
listen, legitimate self-defense does exist. So to think that they're going to go down into the street to loot, to burn everything, do you think this is going to be the reaction of my party and of the population? No, this is not true at all.
Mr. President, in your New Year's message, you talked about a governance of national union. Does this mean that if you're re-elected, as you hope, you will govern in a different way, and if so, how?
Well, differently, no. My method of government has produced good results. They're there for all to see. And anybody who's of good faith can see this for themselves. But I will broaden the government and the majority because these forthcoming elections will be the turning point in history of Senegal. Since all the elderly political leaders, like myself or the opposition, because we belong to this same generation, people talk about my age, but in actual fact, people in the opposition, the leader is older than me. He's about 6 or 7 years older than me. And it's true that in the West, one does not always understand the benefit of being an elderly man and being in good health because one needs the wisdom and the point of reference, etc. But the next elections, with the most likely assumption being that I will win, what does this mean? This means that all these people who belong to my generation will be replaced by the young generation in their own party. And this is a fact because they're not going to wait for another 6 or 7 years. The young people in these parties want to participate actively in political life. And this means that I will be the only one of my generation as the head of state in Senegal. So what am I going to do? I'm going to prepare my party, the same generation in my party, to stand for office, stand for election at some point. We'll have free democratic elections, and I won't be here when these elections take place. I could be so under the Constitution, but I'll be outside of the presidential palace, and these elections will take place between Senegalese people belonging to the same generation, between the ruling majority and the opposition. So the dinosaurs, such as myself, will leave political life, and this means that there will be a change of generation. And my mission today is to prepare for the handover, not Semba replacing Demba, but a handover to a new generation. And this will be something new because we have been dealing with conflicts which existed when we were students in France, between the Marxists, the liberals. So it'll be all the old generation and the new generation from the opposition, from the Socialist Party, from my own party. They don't have all these ideological problems that we've been dragging along with us for so long. So we'll have a new Senegal of technocrats based on know-how, and no longer Senegal with politicians who basically make speeches with no content.
A question about Casamance. There has been a new outbreak of attacks in Casamance on military positions by the MFDC. If you're re-elected, what do you propose to solve the Casamance crisis?
Let me say this. I said at the time when I was elected for the first time, I said that I would resolve the problem in a few months, and I really did believe that. And Mr. Diouf believed that, and the Army High Command believed that, because they came to see me when I was a minister. And with Mr. Diouf, they said, Minister, we feel that you're the only person who can solve the problem of Casamance. And indeed, I moved around freely in Casamance with activists. The warlords was one of the former presidents of one sector of my party, so we had direct parties with these people, and this led me to believe I could solve the problem. But unfortunately, this was not the case, because we still have Salif Sadio, who was supported by Laurent Gbagbo. He's moved to Côte d'Ivoire. He's been there 2 or 3 times. He's raised funds there. He's gained weapons there, and he's the one who represents the problem. But if I'm elected, I'm going to try to solve the problem. Now, I had an idea, and I've spoken about this in Casamance a few days ago. There's no question of this conflict going beyond the borders. This is a local conflict, not an international conflict. And I know the people of Saint-Egidio, because I worked with them when I was a member of the opposition and when I worked on reconciliation missions, especially. These are friends, and I asked them to come to act as facilitators between the government of Senegal and the Salif Sadio, so that we could solve this question, this issue. And I think we came within a hair's breadth of retrieving the arms of the MDPC. And they even said, when should we hand over the weapons? And this didn't work, but I'm still continuing to try to ensure that we have peace in Casamance.
You mentioned the name of Laurent Gbagbo. Laurent Gbagbo is now being arraigned in front of the International Criminal Court in The Hague. He has been arrested with the help of French troops in Côte d'Ivoire. What impression do you have when you see this image of Laurent Gbagbo in front of the International Criminal Court in Europe?
Well, Laurent Gbagbo, who's no friend of mine, everybody knows this, he's a socialist, I'm a liberal. We have fought on a friendly basis, we greet each other at international meetings, but in actual fact, there's always been an underlying rivalry between us. Now, when he had problems with his opposition, he called me, and I went to Côte d'Ivoire, and I tried to achieve consensus on the 500,000 voters, the disputed votes on either side. And I've often advised him. He didn't listen to me. He chose violence. He was beaten in the election, and he refused to accept the result, with all the attendant consequences, deaths, much loss of life, too much loss of life. Now he is going to stand trial in an international court, and Senegal is the first country to have ratified this court.
You, as an African, as a public figure who is attached to the Renaissance of Africa, aren't you disturbed that he is being judged by an international court and not in Africa?
It does bother me, because I think Africa should have had this court to deal with African affairs. It does bother me as a Pan-African, but we have created courts such as the Sierra Leone court or the court of Aruja, but we should have had courts for this purpose. This was not done, And the International Criminal Court is a different matter altogether. This is a court for all criminals, all those who've perpetrated genocide and who are not tried in their own country. And I feel that this is international justice at work. This is completely normal. And again, Senegal was the first country to ratify the Treaty of Rome, which established the court.
Mr. President, in January, the African Union will have to look at the case of Hissène Habré. There are two solutions being studied: extradition to Belgium and possibly to Rwanda. What solution do you prefer?
Well, there again, when we saw that nobody wanted to try Hissène Habré, I volunteered, because we cannot accept in principle that an African should have to be sent abroad to be tried. So we volunteered, and everybody agreed. The African Union, our European partners, the United States, everybody said that Senegal is known for being a country under the rule of law with competent justice, judges, independent judiciary. But I had legal difficulties. The African Union, which was called upon to deal with the issue, left three possibilities. One was to try him. The second one was to extradite him to Belgium. And the third option was to establish a court under specific international standards. And I called on the Court of Appeal of Dakar with a request from Belgium, because Belgium says that it's asking for extradition of Hissène Habré, but it's not applying the forms of extradition. It's not enough for the Foreign Affairs Minister to write a letter asking for extradition. There's a procedure to be applied. It has to go through a judge. The judge deals with this and puts out an international mandate requesting extradition, and the Belgians failed to comply with these principles, and now I think that they've done so, and the Court of Appeal has been asked to rule on this, and it's most likely that Hissène Habré will be extradited to Belgium. I wouldn't have done it before if I had not had the endorsement of the African Union. The African Union says this is a possible solution, so if the Court of Appeal decides to extradite him, then I will extradite him.
So, very briefly, you're prepared, if legal procedures are respected, for him to be extradited to Belgium?
Yes, of course, because I have the endorsement of the African Union, which I didn't have before.
Very well. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Laurent Corot of Radio France Internationale, and thank you for listening to this interview in the music room of the Presidential Palace in Dakar.